Next on the news, billions of dollars spent to renovate LaGuardia Airport, but an airport chapel isn't in the plans. Why developers nixed the idea and what the chaplain there is doing about it. New details about the Houston music concert that ended in tragedy while stunned survivors come together and pray.
It could have been us, like anything, and we just feel sad for the families.
By plane and by car, the U.S. once again allowing travelers into the country, but strict COVID restrictions still remain in place. And they're off with a bang and a blessing from the church as the New York City Marathon returns in all its glory. Currents News starts right now. A modern and shiny airport is welcoming travelers at LaGuardia, but one priest says the space provided to pray just doesn't cut it. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Billions of dollars were spent to renovate LaGuardia. Fancy eateries, shops, and a stunning fountain are all on display. But the airport chaplain says promising conversations about building a much-needed chapel were canceled. Currents News' Jessica Easthope joins us now with the story. Jess.
Thanks, Christine. You might not know it, but most airports have a place to pray or even attend religious services. JFK has one, and there are masses there every day. So why is LaGuardia refusing to get on board with a chapel for all religions? They have the room, 1.3 million square feet of it. What they're missing is faith.
We make this prayer through Jesus Christ.
Beyond the doors of this quiet chapel at John F. Kennedy International is the flurry and commotion of the fifth busiest airport in the country. 61 million people travel through here a year. Father Chris Piasta, the airport chaplain, says many of them, whether it be in their travels or in life, are lost and looking for direction.
They're looking for signs. They're looking for something. That is exactly the common denominator.
But if one of those passengers in need flew into LaGuardia Airport instead, those signs are nowhere to be found.
I have to take upon myself the chapel, put it on my shoulders, and walk with it throughout the airport. But the chapel is a significant and important focal point.
When we pray,
for a long time, Father Piasta was saying Mass in an unused conference room there. But his last service was years ago. And since, he's been asking for an official chapel that all faiths can use. But his plea has fallen on deaf ears. Father Piasta was told by LaGuardia Gateway Partners, the group in charge of the hub's $4 billion redevelopment, a chapel would not exist in the newly renovated airport.
Welcome to the all-new Terminal B at LaGuardia Airport.
But instead, there would be a meditation room. The only problem? No religious symbols or services allowed. But Father Piasta refuses to be grounded. He's bringing his pleas to the top. The CEO of Delta Airlines. It's not just for Catholics, it's for all believers.
We would speak with one voice, but several individuals who know how much of a change does it make in the life of an airport.
Both airports fall within the bounds of the Diocese of Brooklyn. Vincent Levien, Director of External Affairs for DeSales Media Group, the communications and technology arm of the diocese, also reached out about the chapel.
It's an attack on religion. It's crazy that, to be honest, we're having this discussion in 2021 that they don't think religion, any religion, is important at an airport.
Despite the obstacles, Levien spoke with the directors of government affairs from Delta and the Port Authority and says he's optimistic about an outcome. In the meantime, Father Piasta says LaGuardia's travelers and airport workers are suffering. Everyone from victims of natural disasters to refugees stranded for weeks. They need faith, and right now, they're all doing without.
You go to those famous airports all over the world. They have pools, they have golf courses. And I think that the spiritual level is just as important as anything else.
Though there aren't as many connecting flights coming through LaGuardia as there are through JFK, Father Piasta says the people there still need this spiritual connection. And for now, the fate of the chapel, Christine, is up in the air.
So Jess, where do things stand now as far as hopefully getting this accomplished and coming to an agreement that everybody agrees on?
Right, so we do know now that there is room in between two terminals in LaGuardia that can easily be used for a chapel. And remember, that $4 billion renovation isn't done yet, so there's still time. But, you know, the issue is, as I mentioned before, Father Piasta and DeSales Media Group both have calls out to Delta Airlines, American Airlines, the Port Authority, and there are a lot of players in this scenario. You know, it's a big renovation, it's a major project, and so what it's going to come down to is really how these people will prioritize faith.
All right, Jess, thank you. We'll check back with you on this. Also on Currents News, welcome news for tourists. International travelers sick of being stuck because of COVID restrictions are taking to the skies. Many of those flights landing in the Big Apple, and the city, struggling to rebound from the pandemic, is welcoming them with open arms. The rules going into effect Monday allow air travel from a long list of countries, including China, India, South Africa, and the UK. SALMA ABDELAZIZ reports on the first day of flights from Gatwick Airport in London.
After a more than 1 year and a half ban, resumption of travel started again on Monday for non-Americans that are vaccinated back to the United States. This is for EU travelers from the UK, as long as they can show that proof of vaccination to their airliner, as well as show a negative COVID test taken up to 3 days before departure. It's absolutely welcome news and provides the reciprocity that British officials and European officials had been hoping for. American travelers were recommended back to the EU from June and allowed back into the UK from July. So this begins to return those actions, that back and forth of the transatlantic relationship, and of course means that families can finally be reunited, businesses can resume across the Atlantic, but it does come at a very difficult time if you're looking at coronavirus infection rates. The World Health Organization warned last week that the European region could be the epicenter this winter for the pandemic, could see up to 500,000 deaths due to the virus. Germany also today reporting among the highest infection rates that country has seen. But again, U.S. officials here hoping that the resumption of travel, along of course with the proof of vaccination of those passengers and other precautions, could begin to move towards normal life, while of course still being very much aware of the risks of the virus. SALMA ABDELAZIZ, London.
The newly opened airport gates means a lot of tearful reunions. The restrictions were some of the most severe in U.S. history, keeping some families apart for nearly 2 years. While airlines are warning to prepare for long lines, travelers say they don't mind when loved ones are waiting on the other side.
I'm visiting family and friends here in New York. That's it, no longer on a screen. It's going to be hugs, it's going to be in person, catching up, a lot of stories to tell.
Delta says it's seen a 450% increase in international bookings in the 6 weeks since the reopening was announced. These travel restrictions are lifting just as the number of COVID cases are rising so quickly in Europe. They're breaking records again. In fact, a 55% rise in the past 4 weeks alone has turned the continent back into the epicenter of the pandemic. That's according to World Health Organization, which is calling on wealthier nations to share vaccine supplies with others. South of our border, there was about a 20-minute wait at car lanes for those looking to cross from Mexico into the U.S., a little shorter wait for pedestrians. Non-essential travelers have to show Border Patrol their proof of vaccination before they're allowed in. But unlike travelers from overseas, they don't have to show a negative COVID test. Meanwhile, in Texas, as investigators release new details about what happened at the tragic Astroworld Music Festival, the faithful are gathering to honor the 8 lives lost. This as mourners and surviving concertgoers decorate the streets near the festival venue with flowers and candles in memory of the victims. Excitement and adrenaline soon turned to panic and horror as a crowd of 50,000 plummeted into chaos at the Astroworld Music Festival last Friday. Houston's faithful now gathering to honor the 8 people who lost their lives.
I can only imagine what they feel, the heartbreak.
Jim Mackingvale, also known as Mattress Mac, organized the prayer vigil at Houston's Annunciation Catholic Church.
We're all at a loss to explain what happened. All we can do now is pray for the ones that unfortunately perished and pray for the ones that are still injured.
Of the 8 dead, the youngest was just 14 years old. The oldest was 27.
We have to remember the nation is grieving, that we have victims from Illinois, we have a victim from Washington State, many Texans.
As people pray for the victims, their families are searching for answers as to what happened.
There's still a lot of unanswered questions, but we're going to sift through all that. We're talking about we're focusing on the actions of the crowd. What led them to push and surge towards the front of that stage?
Concertgoer Charles Gamez attended the service wearing a shirt he made for the festival. Emblazoned on it is the passage Psalm 91, a verse calling for God's protection. He and his family made it out before the chaos unfolded.
my little brother. It could have been us, like anything, and we just feel sad for the families.
Speaking out on social media, the concert's headliner, Travis Scott, says he too is in shock.
I'm honestly just devastated.
Travis Scott says he and other Astroworld officials are working together with the Houston Police Department to assist the families of victims, and Scott is promising to pay for all funeral costs. President Biden is doing an about-face, now saying undocumented families separated at the border do indeed deserve to be compensated.
You coming across the border, whether it was legal or illegal, and you lost your child. It's gone. You deserve some kind of compensation, no matter what the circumstance.
Just days before, the president responded to a White House correspondent who asked him about his support of an ACLU proposal to pay families $450,000 per person lost at the border by saying, quote, not gonna happen. Texas is cracking down on illegal immigration under a program meant to stem the flow of migrants. Operation Lone Star began in the spring. It's led to the jailing of some 1,500 migrants since July. But so far, only about 3% have been convicted of crimes. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says his policy of, quote, arrest and jail is a response to Biden's revolving door illegal immigration policy. There's a lot more news headed your way. The New York City Marathon over the weekend started off with a big bang. Meet the priest who blesses the cannons. Plus, it's the one question that can put young men on the path to priesthood, and some say it's not asked enough. I'll talk to Bishop Checchio for Vocations Awareness Week. And the scent of fresh Christmas trees may be nothing but a memory for millions of families celebrating the holidays this year. We'll tell you why when we come back. After skipping a year because of the pandemic, the 50th running of the New York City Marathon went off without a hitch. The 26.2-mile trek got started with the help of a Queens priest who prays this marathon will be a race to normalcy.
Heavenly Father, we ask for blessings on my brothers and sisters here today.
A blessing, then a blast.
Fire!
And they were off. Runners pounding the pavement at the 50th annual New York City Marathon, which got underway as it does every year, with prayers for the runners and the city they run through.
And we're going to ask God to give us a new sense of renewal, to get us back to normal, to take nothing for granted anymore.
Father Brian Carney is a chaplain in the Veteran Corps of Artillery, which has used its ceremonial World War II cannons to kick off the famed marathon for the past decade. But this year, the blessing of the cannons took on a little more significance. You see, Father Carney is also a hospital chaplain, and after battling the pandemic, which canceled last year's marathon, and battling his own case of COVID, he says seeing the runners race to the finish line is a sign that the city is also moving forward.
It's a sign that things are coming back to normal, and that's a good thing. We need to get back to normal.
The Veteran Corps of Artillery is one of the oldest historical military commands in the state. Its members tell us this is one of their favorite missions. U.S. bishops are on a mission to recruit more priests. It's National Vocations Awareness Week, a week dedicated to celebrating and promoting vocations to the priesthood in the U.S. And it's much needed as the number of clergy has been on the decline. Earlier, I spoke with Bishop James Checchio, the chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Clergy, Consecrated Life, and Vocations, about what they're doing to boost vocations.
We certainly do something every week for vocations throughout the year, and it's certainly a priority in our diocese. And this week in particular, we're working with our high schools. We're working at Rutgers. We had a holy hour for vocation at Rutgers University at the Catholic Student Center this past weekend. All of our parishes were asked to highlight it somehow, at least through intercessions, but also if they could in the homilies or at the end of Mass. So we certainly have been doing a full court press. Our grammar schools were all holding vocation programs too, vocation awareness programs.
Oh, wow. All right, I want to show you some numbers about the current state of vocations here in the U.S. According to the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, or CARA, About 50 years ago, there were roughly 60,000 priests in the U.S. In 2000, that number was nearly 46,000, and since then, it continues to steadily drop. Last year, there were only about 35,500 priests throughout the country. What's your reaction when you hear these numbers, and any idea why there's been such a decline?
Well, it certainly was a different world 50 years ago, huh? So it's hard to make any comparisons between now and the church then and vocations then. But I know in our diocese here in Metuchen, we've had an increase. We've more than doubled our seminarians in the last 5 years. So we've ordained 12 men in the last 3 years. That's been a great boon for us to have these young priests. We're going to put priests back in our high schools, which will hopefully help with vocations in the future too. National trends, as you might know, I served as director of the North American College in Rome from 2005 to 16, and we were completely full. We had a waiting list some years. So we were certainly receiving many students, and it seems to be mixed across our country, in different places. I was talking to one archbishop the other day, and his seminary is doing very well and has a waiting list, whereas other seminaries are down. So certain regions of the country seem to be doing better than others, So I think about 10 years ago, there were the same amount of priestly ordinations as there are this year. I think we've had little ebbs and flows, but I think the last 15 years or so, it's been ups and downs, and I think we're in a little bit of a down right now in the current year, but not terrible compared to. I think we've reached some stability since early 2000s.
Okay, well, what would you say to someone who's curious about clergy life?
Certainly, the first and most important thing is prayer. It's a miracle that anyone can hear the Lord's call on this day. That's the first thing. I'm grateful that a young man or woman would listen to the call for the priesthood of religious life, make the quiet in their hearts to be able to hear God speaking to them. There's so much noise in our world. So I always encourage them first when they think they're hearing something to double their efforts in prayer, to spend more time in prayer, especially in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Ask our Blessed Mother's intercession for them. She won't misguide us, or mislead us. So I certainly try to have them focus on prayer, and then speak to priests or religious women that they know, trust about their experiences.
Speaking of that, how did you know you wanted to be a priest?
I thought about it when I was a young child, and then, of course, in high school and college, I got distracted and started to do other things and had other interests. And when I was away at college, I would visit the Blessed Sacrament, stop in for visits a week, and I think just being away from everybody and everything kind of created the space that I needed to discern appropriately. And to really focus on listening to the Lord rather than letting all this good stuff, which I experienced in my life. I was blessed, and I had lots of different opportunities, that are always knocking on our door. And I think it's just easy to get distracted with those opportunities. So I think being away and being by myself created a better atmosphere for listening to the Lord. So during college, I discerned and went back into seminary.
Okay. Bishop James Cecchio, chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Clergy, Consecrated Life, and Vocations. Thanks for being here, and of course, we'll pray for more vocations.
Amen. Thanks, Christine. Good to meet you too. God bless you.
Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, a humanitarian crisis is unfolding, and it's getting the Holy Father's attention.
Invito tutti alla preghiera per quelle popolazioni così duramente provate e rinnovo il mio appello affinché prevalgano la concordia fraterna e la via pacifica del dialogo.
The Pope's plea comes as thousands of rebel groups march on the country's capital city. The government there is urging ordinary citizens to take up arms and fight. Since the face-offs began more than a year ago, thousands have been killed, and even more are enduring famine-like conditions. Pope Francis is also giving special attention to the poor closer to the Vatican. He's traveling to the city of Assisi on Friday to meet with 500 less fortunate people from across Europe. The event is in preparation for this Sunday's World Day of the Poor. On that day, the Pope will hold Mass with some 2,000 in St. Peter's Basilica. After Mass, the Vatican will be hosting lunch. Still to come on Currents News, more concerning news about e-cigarettes, the connection between vaping and strokes next. Plus, why a real Christmas tree may have to come off your shopping list this year. Details when we come back. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. If you vape, you may want to hear this. A new study shows e-cigarette users are more likely to have early strokes than regular cigarette smokers. Researchers at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital looked at almost 80,000 records over 3 years and found victims who vaped had strokes roughly 11 years earlier than cigarette smokers. It's unclear what led to the strokes, but researchers think it could be the nicotine found in both products. And finally, with only 51 days until Christmas, we're starting to see some signs that it may be harder than usual to deck your halls this year. That's because the United States is experiencing some tree trouble. Heat waves combined with fires and drought wiped out a lot of evergreen trees this year. Mallory Anderson has that story from a farm in Colorado.
Well, we usually sold about 500 of these a year, and so there's going to be a lot of disappointed families, unfortunately.
Colorado Springs Garden Center, this place is for the birds, revealing today that their usual stock of Christmas trees will be missing this year. Their supplier of 25 years calling it quits because of the labor shortage.
Owner told us that he had a hard time finding cutters this year, and also finding transportation to get the trees here was really difficult, so they just decided to quit doing it.
Labor shortages, high demand, extreme weather in the Pacific Northwest, and a lack of trees planted during the recession, all combining for a perfect storm.
This is nationwide, even worldwide, as we do export Christmas trees to other countries, but it's something that's just going to affect everybody. Like I said, we're fortunate that we do have that relationship with our grower, and everything's ordered, and it's just a matter of getting a semi under it and getting it here on time.
Because of inflation, you'll likely end up paying more for your tree. And if you're determined to have a live Christmas tree in the house, plan to spend Thanksgiving weekend shopping for one.
Don't wait. I know we're going to sell out probably by the first weekend in December. We expect to have trees all around the 2nd or 3rd. I think it's that weekend after Black Friday. And they go fast, and then once they're gone, they're gone.
That was Mallory Anderson reporting. And that is Currents News. Before we go, we just want to acknowledge our new set. The crew here has been working hard to transition from our old studio to our new home for the last several months, and here we are. It looks great, and I hope you like it too. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.